Welcome back, everyone, to the House of Hustle podcast here on Sports Radio 810. We are presented, as always, by our friends at Charlie Hustle, Vintage Gear, Made Fresh, as well as Capital Investment Management, providing financial and wealth management services. My name is Jared Sutton, and I'm joined, as always, by Steven St. John. Steven, we kind of switched chairs for this podcast.
That's right.
It's been a little while. We're trying to get back up and running here. NBA playoffs in full swing. Got a lot to cover. Haven't had a pod in a month, so here we are.
And the NBA Combine also
Yes, sir.
has been a hot topic. And so how did that go?
NBA Combine was great. A long week. The G League Elite Camp starts off Combine week, so it's like a 7-day process now. G League Elite Camp went really good. Had some call-ups, go to the Combine. Combine's a little different where we still do interviews. You're still doing a lot of testing that the players go through, medical testing, all those different things. And then the Thursday, Friday portion of the Combine is all pro day workouts. So they structured it a little differently, but still a beneficial week. All the teams are there. You're talking about free agency. You're talking about the draft coming up and what's ahead and, what scenarios might be in play for different teams. So those conversations kind of begin at the Combine, and then now we get into a lot of these different team workouts. So we'll start bringing players in and have more of like formal interviews, and you get a little bit more time with the prospect as we get closer and closer to the draft, which is today. We're a month away from the NBA draft.
So I know there's always special circumstances, but just in general, how much can a prospect improve or damage their draft stock at the Combine?
I think it depends on every prospect's different. Every player's situation's different. With NIL now being such a factor, a lot of these guys, they can put their name in and they can withdraw, which is coming up. That deadline's here in about 4 or 5 days, where a player will have to decide if they're going to go back to school or not, or stay in the draft. So I think there are special circumstances. A lot of those like lottery picks, first round picks that kind of know they're in that first round, they're not really competing at the Combine. They'll do some drills. It starts to become a lot of these guys are trying to help themselves try to get in maybe the top 40, or maybe they can sneak into the late first round and really help themselves if they're playing and they're competing. And it's also for guys that are kind of in that mid-major that had, their kid from Akron, Enrique Freeman, who was player of the year in the MAC. He was great in Chicago, got a G League call-up, was in the NBA Combine. It's a chance for him to really help himself and jump into not just the draft, but maybe even jump into, a high range. So it really depends. Baylor Shireman at Creighton, who we've talked about on the podcast several times, he was already not going back to college, but I thought he really helped himself because he played. Everybody knows how good Baylor Shireman is. He always is going to interview well, but then he really played well in both games that he played in the scrimmage portion. So you can help yourself. You can also hurt yourself. And in many cases, some of these guys get a rude awakening of, wait, I got a lot of things I got to work on. Maybe I should go back to school.
So maybe this might be a dumb question, but we always hear about players getting a report back of what they are or
what the range is,
first round or second round. When do they get that feedback, and who's responsible for that?
Yeah, so it's the league that puts that feedback together. They work with the agents, but a lot of top executives, or let's say it's assistant GMs that run the scouting department, or the director of scouting, it depends on the kind of the title, they'll really kind of formulate some of that feedback. A lot of times G League GMs, too, will be a part of these decisions as well in terms of giving that feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of input. Every team gives input. And then the NBA takes that feedback, sorts that out, and then it's more of like a formal feedback to the agent and to the player of strengths, weaknesses, what they can improve upon, and it really comes back to where is their range really at. And that also, too, like that feedback, it not necessarily is coming right after the Combine either. It's sort of you get done with the Combine and players will go work out for teams. And really the teams, they're at their discretion of giving that feedback to the player if the player wants that feedback, obviously.
So the players don't automatically get it from the NBA?
No, not automatically. Okay. It usually is some time. I can't remember necessarily when that – it depends on, where the league is at in terms of the withdrawal deadline. Certain players can request that feedback earlier than later too, I believe. So
you want that to be able to make your decision.
For sure.
You don't want that the last minute.
And a lot of players take that very seriously. And I do think that teams are players will ask that in interviews too, even before they get feedback of, where teams see them or what can they improve upon in their games or what they're looking for. That can be an open discussion too. If the player asks that, which more times than not they will, because they really do want to know what teams think of them so they can make their decision.
All right, so let's, speaking of the NBA, let's talk about the playoffs.
Yes, sir.
That are going on right now. We are in the middle of the conference finals. And on paper, the T-Wolves and the Mavericks looks like an incredible series. And then on paper, you were thinking, well, hopefully the Pacers can be competitive and surprise some people and extend the series against Boston. And I know my producer, Jake, felt like once I hate using this word, but they gave away game one. Boy, did they give it away. He kind of felt like, that was their chance to make it a series, and now Boston's going to roll. Then you factor in Halliburton's injury, and that's going to be, now it goes back to Indiana, and so we'll see. But I just want to go back to game one.
Yeah.
Because as someone that loves basketball, watching that game, that's got to want to make you pull your hair out of your head.
Yeah.
Because there were turnovers. There was a coach in Rick Carlisle that admitted after the game he should have called a timeout to advance the ball and then figure out a way to get the ball in, shoot some free throws, and win the game. They didn't do that. They didn't have a great look at the end of the game once Boston tied it. And on top of that, then it started the discussion again. When do you foul when you're up 3? Do you foul, and when do you foul? So there's all these different things that conspired against them. And if you're Indiana, you just got to be kicking yourself. And so let's start with number one. When do you foul up 3? Do you foul up 3? Because I don't think it's just a hard answer like, yes, you foul up 3. It's got to be, okay, how much time left?
Yeah.
Because Jake and I got into a discussion. He said anything in single digits, he's fouling. And I said, well, I think under 5 seconds for sure. Anything more than that, then I'm open to discussion. What about you in that situation? What did they make a mistake? Do you foul up 3? When do you foul up 3?
Yeah, I'm a believer that you do foul up 3, especially just the level of shot making. It's a make or miss league in the NBA, as they say. And yeah, I was talking to a former GM about this scenario, and he made a good point. He's like, most teams, they don't find ways to win games. They find ways to lose games. Like that's what that's what you have to be afraid of, especially in the playoffs. And I think in that specific situation, like all these situations are different when you're up 3. In the situation where Jaylen Brown gets the ball in the corner, first of all, Indiana broke down, and that pass should never happen.
Right. How did he get the ball to begin with?
That's where it starts. You cannot – I think it's also a little bit on the baseline defender in terms of how you're guarding the inbound pass, and you got to take away the corner hit. That just can't happen. And Jaylen Brown knew he was going to be open too. And he talked about in his postgame that's what they said in the huddle, that if they run this play, Jaylen Brown said, I'm going to be open, and he was. The problem is Pascal Siakam can't foul and give the worst case scenario of a 4-point play in that scenario. Once the catch is made, Jaylen Brown's going up with that ball. And so you cannot put yourself in a risk of fouling for a chance at 4. And the only way you can get away with that is if Jaylen Brown makes the catch and you foul right away, instantaneously, right? And that didn't happen. The same thing could be said. If you're up 3, there's 7 seconds left, the ball is getting inbounded 94 feet away, or even in the half court and the ball comes in, you can foul right away, right? Because more times than not, you're going to be able to get that foul on the floor. I think in that situation, and Pascal Siakam was in a bad spot. He couldn't foul there, really, in the grand scheme of things. Indiana never should have been in that position, regardless. The turnovers, especially the consecutive turnovers in, 15 seconds? You can't do that closing a basketball game in high school, in college, in the NBA. Drew Holiday should get a ton of credit for the turnover he forced on Tyrese Halliburton about, I would say, 30 seconds prior to that, forcing that. He's an elite all-league defender.
But how do you not call a timeout?
I don't know. And I'm glad Coach Carlisle just kind of dove on the grenade afterward. I think he took full responsibility for it, as he should have. I was shocked. Coach Carlisle is a veteran head coach, and you got to know situations, and it's like anything in sports, closing a game out in the playoffs in a close game. It's going to come down to execution, and Pacers just didn't do that, and you cannot turn the ball over. And some of those turnovers are just stupid turnovers, just bad, unforced turnovers, and just not valuing the ball. And you give Boston an opportunity. Jaylen Brown sticks a big shot, goes to overtime, and then the rest of that overtime, it was Jason Tatum taking over, who really wasn't much of a factor. Like, he was okay, but he wasn't at an elite Jason Tatum level. But you opened the door to that in the overtime period, and the rest is history. And you give up a game one that you steal that one, it's different.
Right.
You steal game one on the road. It's a great starting point for the series, and they aren't able to get it done. And then that leads into game two, as you mentioned.
Right, and you weren't going to win without Halliburton once he got hurt.
Yep.
But that's kind of been the story, at least in the Eastern Conference, injuries, because some people can say, rightly so, that maybe Indiana doesn't get past New York, who were just ravaged with injury.
Yep.
And then Brunson goes out in that game 7 with any chance of them making a comeback in the fourth quarter once he went out there, fracture in his hand. I mean, that was over. And so, like in any other sport, injuries are such a big storyline when it comes to the playoffs, right?
Yep. And it's health and durability, availability, it matters. The league is so physical right now. I think that's probably my main takeaway of the playoffs in general this year, is just the level of physicality escalates significantly from the regular season to the playoffs, let alone, the talent and the skill level and the size and the athleticism, the explosiveness, the shot making, all that is on display in the playoffs. But I just feel like the level of physicality is ramped up. And a lot of these teams have like primary defensive stoppers that are physical defenders that get up into you, that don't give you anything easy. If you're downhill attacking the rim, you're going to have to earn it. We saw that with, I felt like Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart in the conversation, DiVincenzo, like they had to play so tough throughout the playoffs for the Knicks to win, and Brunson was great. But the amount of contact that those guys took, especially just Jalen Brunson in general, with the amount of usage, him in the ball screen, the minutes that were played is very much talked about. You talk about the regular season too. There's 82 games. You got to manage that. But some of these injuries are freak things. Some of them can be wear and tear injuries, type of things of overuse. I think you look
Jokic was out of gas.
Jokic was out of gas. Jamal Murray was out of gas. Jamal Murray's had injuries in the playoffs too. I do think there's something to be said for just with the playoffs taking a leap forward from the regular season, and it's different. There's no question about it. The regular season and the playoffs, there's a huge jump. And sometimes, like, just getting into, like, the Western Conference was absolutely loaded. You're trying to fight for seeding. That's what the NBA wants. The parity conversation right now in the NBA is a great conversation with just these 4 teams that are in it. One of them is going to win a title, and you're going to have your 6th new champion in the NBA. It's a great thing for the league. But just trying to get that seeding, there was so much stress and guys playing banged up to in the regular season. I also think that's a part of this conversation as well.
We had Matt Moore on the show on Sports Radio 810. Does a great job of covering the NBA for the Action Network. Also covers the Nuggets. Yeah. And I asked him, who's getting blamed in Denver. And before I could even finish the question, he said Michael Porter Jr. And so I said, well, I'm going to ask Jared about that. Is that fair that Michael Porter Jr. He blamed himself, but is that fair that he's looks like he's the scapegoat for the series loss to the T-Wolves?
Well, as you know, and as I'll mention, and we're seeing this in a lot of these different series. I think we're seeing it with just Boston being up 2-0. Role players matter in the playoffs. They're huge in winning. Yes, you need your superstars to be great and be elite, and they're superstars for a reason. They're max contract guys for a reason. But your role players really dictate playoff games. IQ, toughness, those type of things really show up in the playoffs. Michael Porter struggled in their series. There's no doubt. He was elite in the series prior to that. I do think Minnesota's defense gets a lot of credit here because Minnesota had the best defense in the league really all season. Their defense was great. Jokic and the way Denver plays, a lot of split actions. A lot of opportunities for Jokic to carve you up as a scorer and as a passer. He's the best big man in the league. He's the MVP for a reason. And they needed those Kentavious Caldwell-Popes, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon. I don't even think Aaron Gordon was I don't think he was bad necessarily, but he wasn't to the level as he was the prior series.
Did you talk about role players in that series? The sixth man of the year, Reed, was incredible.
Oh,
when he came in for Karl Anthony Towns in that last game,
Yeah.
there was no drop. The play got even better. He was incredible.
It helps when your sixth man can start easily,
Right.
And Naz Reid's development speaks for itself, coming from LSU, and he's just continued to get better and better and better with his game. He used to just be kind of like a shooter. Now he can do so many different things. He's a mobile big that can switch. You can play him in different areas of the floor, different coverages. He's been great. Nickeil Alexander-Walker's been great for Minnesota as well. I think Mike Conley is so important to that team. Yes, it's driven by Anthony Edwards. There's no doubt. Rudy Gobert gets a lot of heat, but at the end of the day, Rudy Gobert, everything gets funneled to him defensively, and it starts with Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker,
That shot,
Naz Reid, all these guys.
Gobert hit on Jokic. It looked like he hit the rafters and just dropped in like a teardrop.
And how many times has Nikola Jokic done this to the Lakers, the team where he just hits these shots where you're like, what are you supposed to do with that?
Right.
I'm sure Anthony Davis, has nightmares of that with Nikola Jokic hitting jumpers over him. But this is what the playoffs bring you. Luka and Kyrie have been special. Like, that's kind of now being talked about a lot, about that dynamic duo. They've been great all year. I think that's kind of now a talking point, which you would have a year ago said, is Luka and Kyrie good for each other? I just love how the narratives can shift in 1 year. There's just so many storylines in this playoffs. Tyrese Halliburton, he's a star. Iowa State kid, 2 years at Iowa State. His freshman year wasn't really viewed as an NBA player.
Did you see this coming when he was at Iowa State? Or even close to this?
You're talking to the guy that, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn with this. I'm not doing this. But I was all over Tyrese Halliburton, freshman, sophomore year.
This guy's tooting his horn right now.
He was such a special player because he was on those teams with, George Niang and Monte Morris and Naz Mitrou-Long. Like that was a really good team. And he was sort of just kind of sprinkled into that team. And then the next year, he was a point guard, and all his numbers just went through the roof. And he played multiple positions, and so much was made of his shot, and it's unique, and it's unorthodox, and he's too skinny. He won't be able to handle the physicality of the league. And I kept thinking, like, this is one of the smartest players in college basketball. And the Iowa State team, his sophomore year, was not even close to what it was his freshman year. And he was just an elite leader, hard-working kid. Now he's a superstar. He's finally showing his aggressive nature to score. He was so passive, I thought, early on in the playoffs. And the Pacers, for them to go where they are now and have a chance at the finals, he's got to be aggressive all the time. And I think Tyrese is a little bit probably frustrated about game one because he had some uncharacteristic turnovers from Drew Holiday really getting into him and making him uncomfortable. But what a story Tyrese Halliburton is, and a local kid. And he's in these four stars that we're talking about with Jason Tatum, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, and Luka. Tyrese is a part of all those four. Of one of these guys is going to win a title this year, and that's great for the league because these four stars.
So let's assume it's dangerous to do because it's still a series. Let's assume Boston advances.
Yeah.
Then who's got the better chance, in your opinion, of being competitive and actually beating Boston in the finals? Is it Minnesota or is it Dallas?
I would have told you Minnesota. And I still think Minnesota can make this a series. It's one game right now that they've gone through, and you adjust accordingly. Dallas was great. Minnesota, I thought, had every chance to win that game as well in game one and had a lead and then just let the foot off the gas in the fourth quarter. It was wild. And Kyrie was great. Luka was great. They get great production from Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, Derek Lively, who is a big-time rookie that plays a lot of minutes, that high motor, high energy, switches everything, can guard anywhere, true 7-footer that is kind of your mobile NBA stretch big, that is probably more of a defensive, mobile, energetic, kind of that player that can give you the little things that help you win a game, very blue-collar by nature. So he's good for them in these roles that we're talking about. And the trade to get PJ Washington, I thought, was huge. Derek Jones, oh my gosh, how good has he been for Dallas in these playoffs? Kyrie and Luka right now really look to be that dynamic 1-2 punch, and Minnesota's going to have to overcome that. And to overcome that, Anthony Edwards has to be great. Jaden McDaniels has been very good in these playoffs for Minnesota. He's a really good piece off of Karl Anthony Towns, off of Anthony Edwards. But you look at Minnesota has all the ability and the talent and the punch to get to the finals. They have all the ability to beat Dallas. The reality is Dallas has probably got a little bit more experience in this conversation. Kyrie, Luka, they've been in these moments. Kyrie's a championship player. Minnesota's that team that is a great story. I don't think they're the underdog here, but I do think Dallas has a little bit of an advantage. Carlisle's been in several of these moments. You look at Coach Finch, who I'm a huge fan of, very smart, bright, modern-day mind for the game. They're a great staff, but Dallas kind of maybe has a little bit of an edge here in being in these moments. Taking game one on the road really, really matters, and Dallas got that done. Let's see where it goes from here. I still like Minnesota in the series to get out of it, but I think this is definitely a series you could see going 6 or 7 easily.
But you think either team could give Boston a good run in the finals?
I think so. I think so. I think we're at that place now where, it looks you don't want to write off Indiana, but now with Tyrese with the hamstring situation, Boston's got, all the – and Boston has won 2 games where they sneak one game out in overtime, a game they probably should have lost. And then in game 2, Tatum really struggled. Jason Tatum is – I feel like he's on this – like kind of a little bit of a struggle, a little bit of a slump, but he's still getting his numbers. But Jaylen Brown has been huge for this team and why Boston is where they are up 2-0. I like the idea of Boston, and whether it's Dallas, whether it's Minnesota, that series will be great because Boston probably, especially out of the East, being the team all year that's been the best team in the league, but the Western Conference has been the best conference by far, given it's been the best we've seen the Western Conference be, probably in the league's history. And we got a team like Dallas or Minnesota that is super talented with a superstar on both teams. That's going to be fun once we get to the finals.
So here's a question, and this is I'm not trying to get in this LeBron Jordan debate or anything else, but it is interesting to see Kyrie and what he's doing right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we think back to that championship that LeBron James, his most impressive championship with the Cavs against Golden State. Kyrie was such a big part of that hit that big shot, right?
Yep.
If he is a major part of a championship run with Dallas, what does that do to his legacy? Because I feel like there's been a lot of disrespect around Kyrie Irving. He said some crazy things in the past that led to that disrespect, but with the way he's playing right now, and if he's the Robin to Luka's Batman and they win a championship, do we look at Kyrie different in his legacy?
So here's what I think is different of Kyrie. So let's start with this. I think he's one of the best ball handlers I've ever seen in my lifetime in terms of his ability to put the ball on the floor and go – balls on a string. Like legitimately, it's amazing to watch him play basketball when he puts the ball on the floor. He can get anywhere on the floor at any time. And I know like – we reached the point of the NBA season where there's a lot of takes, right? That you turn on the television and there's all these like comparisons to players, a lot of hot takes. But I seriously believe Kyrie Irving is one of the best ball handlers the league's seen. Now Kyrie's had his struggles too, and I think some of it comes back to this Cavs team when they won a title and he hits a big shot. They win a champ. That was LeBron's team, and Kyrie at that point had all the confidence that he wanted to be the guy. He wanted to be the number one, not the Robin. He wanted to be the Batman.
Right.
It's a great analogy you gave because it's true. I think Kyrie's accepted the fact, and I think he's heard all the noise.
Because that's Luka's team. That's it.
It's Luka's team. I think he's now embraced it. Instead of trying to fight it, I think he's embraced it. And you hear a lot of chatter this year that Kyrie's been different in that he has taken on a leadership role within that Dallas team and taken a lot of that burden off of Luka. And that's why they've been able to get to where they are now, is that Kyrie's just totally flipped and said, the situation in Brooklyn, right, with KD, that didn't go according to plan. He had a lot of issues on and off the floor there. That was a homecoming for him too.
Right.
So I just feel like he's kind of realized, and experience does this. I think age does this too, where you kind of get a lot of perspective and you look back and you think, man, maybe I made some mistakes along the way, and it's overshadowing what my talent level is and what my game is, because he is such a talent. And now you're seeing that. And I just feel like the fact he's embraced this more and more, where I think he's comfortable in his own skin now. And he realizes, well, I've won a championship. I am a great player. And he's said this openly. He wants to go back and win a championship. It's not so much about the numbers, the records, trying to live up to this status or trying to live up to this legacy conversation.
He knows winning another title would be big.
Yeah, let's leave this alone and let's go after this championship. And he wanted to go to Dallas because he thought Luka was that. And Luka was, first team All-NBA again. He's one of the youngest players in NBA history to be voted a fifth time first team All-League. He's still very young for his age. He's just been that much of a star.
Some of the shots he makes, man.
Oh, it's incredible. And the pace at his size, 6'8", and he's big. And, he gets a lot of flack for not being a good defender or complaining a lot. There's things out there that probably weren't that. But at the end of the day, my guy, he broke up a lob that was a huge play in game one to win them game one on the defensive side of the ball. But obviously, the three-point shot, off a sidestep, highly contested. It's incredible. And Luka live too, just always under control. Always has his fingers all over the game, can take over a game at any point. His passing, his scoring, and then adding, I think, what this team has gotten this team over the hump. Addressing rim protection, getting true fives. Daniel Gafford has been great. PJ Washington, Lively. Those guys are huge X factors for this Dallas team.
All right, before we wrap things up, who is your hustler of the month for this episode of House of Hustle?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a player that I got a love for. He was with us in New Orleans. He's a Villanova national champion. He's bounced around the league a little bit. He's extremely valuable. He's the best rebounding guard in the league. And I love that, we're talking about our hustler of the month, and Charlie Hustle, has that heart logo that symbolizes what Charlie Hustle is. I'm going to give it to Josh Hart, who played through an abdominal strain, a very painful abdominal strain, just to play in the playoffs, banged up throughout the playoffs, was great as a shooter in that first series, in the playoffs, shot 45% from three, elite rebounding guard, great role player, great person, great leader, great story. Definitely was kind of overlooked in the draft process as well, and has really kind of carved out a great niche in the NBA. He was great for us in New Orleans. Unfortunately, we made some moves that allowed us to get CJ McCollum to improve our roster, but Josh was such a huge part of our team and our culture, and guys just loved him, and that's how he's loved across the league. And I think he made a name for himself in these playoffs. I think a lot of people nationally now know how good Josh Hart is and how good he is in his role. Great athlete, 3-and-D piece, great in transition, great around the rim. But his level of toughness and his heart to go to the glass and rebound. There are many games you look up and he's the smallest guy on the floor, and he's rebounding balls left and right. So hustler of the month, I'm going to give it to Josh Hart. I think he's very deserving of that.
All right, before we say goodbye, give a shout out to the people that make this podcast possible, Jarrett.
Yep, our big thanks to Charlie Hustle and Capital Investment Management. They've been with us 2 years running now with the podcast. Capital Investment Management, their first year with us. They do so much work to help us get on with this podcast. We need to get to Charlie Hustle. We keep talking about this. We need to do that. But always some vintage gear made fresh. I think they just had a new line come out within the last couple of weeks. There's maybe some new collegiate lines coming out soon we need to get our hands on, maybe some Mizzou gear for us.
They got a baseball shirt that says the boys are playing some ball.
Royals are red hot.
That's right.
Get your summer started with some Charlie Hustle gear. So big thank you to all of our sponsors that really support us.
And thank you for listening to and watching the House of Hustle. Until the next episode, remember, Kansas City is for hustlers.